What's up, everybody? My name is Adam Palmer. This is Daily Nonsense. On today's show, we're going to be talking about some PSA grading numbers for the month of October and a follow-up to some TV ratings from Game 7 of two different sports. If you like this video, make sure you hit the like button. If you're a new viewer, make sure you hit subscribe so you don't miss any future Daily Nonsense content. Let's get into it. I'm not sure how many more times I will cover this sort of topic on the show, just because I feel like my commentary on it is basically the same every single time, or at least for the past couple months. And it is that the PSA numbers, or the grading numbers, came out for the month of October, since now we're in November. And PSA in the month of October almost graded 2 million cards, which year over year is up 36%, and then month over month is up 27%. SGC, on the other hand, which actually I think one interesting thing that was in GemRate's data is they actually put Tag in here as like a fifth grading service, and they actually graded more than SGC. So SGC graded 50,000 cards, which year over year is down 69%, and then month over month down 16%. I'm actually a little bit surprised that SGC has slowed down grading this much. And a while back, I had talked to John Newman over at Sports Card Nation, like basically right after the announcement, where PSA was announcing they were dialing back some of the SGC services and that they were trying to make it more of a boutique agency, which again, I don't necessarily understand how they can do, like, I don't understand why they did that. I don't know. And again, maybe they want people to buy the more expensive grading. They want people to go to PSA because it's more expensive. They have probably much more overhead at PSA than they do SGC. And just overall, they want people to buy PSA grading versus SGC. Now, I don't know if they eventually, well, actually I do. I mean, honestly, at this point, I feel like SGC will probably eventually close down. Like, I think that that's what PSA is trying to do, whether they want to admit it or not. I think that they are trying to squeeze SGC out of the conversation. And if we're looking at it, why would they care if SGC or people are grading with SGC other than the money? I mean, they're grading 2 million cards a month. So it's like, for there to be any competition, Beckett and CGC and now Tag would have to make a major push, which I'm going to look at these numbers, and they have made a major push in the past year. So CGC is up 156% year over year. They graded 530,000 cards. Beckett actually graded 93,000 cards, which they're up 20% for the month over month, and then 86% year over year. And then, like I said, the new grading service Tag that they added to this data, they're up. They graded 51,000, which is 1,000 more than SGC, and they're up 43% month over month. So, I mean, clearly customers are not wanting to send their cards to SGC anymore. They are, and I don't know if that is because it's owned by PSA and they don't, maybe SGC, because that was one of the things that I thought was interesting is the SGC versus PSA before PSA bought SGC. I felt like that was a pretty competitive market between those two companies. Like, I really felt like there were people who specifically went with SGC for specific reasons. I mean, cheaper grading, you weren't getting the premium on the pricing that you were with PSA. You were still getting a pretty decent price on a lot of your cards if you were grading with SGC. But obviously we know now that PSA is kind of just trying to shut them down, essentially. I mean, that's really what's happening. That's what I can imagine happening. I would be surprised if at the end of the year there isn't like some monstrous drop-off with SGC, because every single month I keep sitting here and saying, I can't believe that this many people have just jumped ship. But the thing with this that does make me a little bit nervous is, like, does SGC just become one of, like, you know, BVCG or whatever, or any of these random grading services that you see on eBay? Like, does SGC just become one of those services, or like is because it has so much history that, you know, maybe people don't want to get their new cards graded with them, but the old cards that they have graded are going to keep holding their value, which, based on some of the stuff I've seen people with commentary on this, a lot of the value of SGC has gone down pretty significantly, and people are they're just nervous that like they're looking at a grading service that in 10 years isn't going to be around and is going to be looked at as like a second class grading service where PSA, Beckett has again had a pretty decent resurgence here, and with CGC, a lot of that is going to be TCG, and even with what PSA has done, from the numbers I was looking at, it was over a million. It was like a million, 1.2 million for TCG, and then it was like 800 or 900,000 for sports. So still, TCG is absolutely dominating. Like the whatever it was, the Pikachu, the hat Pikachu card, like that in like a year became one of the most graded cards in PSA's history. Not even just with just sports cards or just TCG, just like one of the most graded cards of all time. And we talked about that, I think, probably like a couple weeks ago, where the Card Ladder podcast, they were talking about the rise and that card being like the number 2 card behind the mantle for the total market cap. And since we did that podcast, it's actually down to 5th in terms of market cap. And unfortunately, a PSA 10 of that card has, like, it was at its peak at 2,500. Now it's sitting at around 1,500. Now, I could argue that the highest of the high, you probably was more like 23 to 2,200. And like the lowest of the low right now is probably more like 16 or 15 or 1,600 or 16 or 1,700. But still, it's lost like almost a third of its value within a couple weeks here. I feel like I was talking about that a couple weeks ago. So like for PSA and for Beckett or whoever, like, is the rise going to continue? Like, we're going to continue to see more modern cards. And I think as we see more modern cards get printed and come out, these PSA numbers may just continue to go up because people are going to be grading older cards, but as more of these new products come out and we're seeing the print runs of these products continue to increase, like, people are going to send the new cards to PSA to get graded. So, like, I don't know. I don't really see necessarily a huge slowdown here for PSA. Maybe for Pokemon, but I don't know as much about that industry. So, I mean, I guess maybe they have more products that are going to come out. Like, I know that, like, there was the 30th anniversary, and then there was, like, some other, there was, like, some evolutions, and then there were some recent like tins that came out that we talked about on yesterday's podcast, and that they were, essentially shutting down, people buying hundreds of those. But like, is that same thing going to happen with PSA's grading of TCG? Like, is TCG and sports cards, like, are those going to coexist and continue to rise in print run? I don't really know. That's what the future will tell. But I think overall, I just don't know how many more times I'm going to talk about these grading numbers, because each month we just see an increase of how many cards are getting graded by PSA. And my commentary feels like it's basically been the same as it has like when back during the summer when PSA announced that SGC was going to be slowing down some of their operations. Then I have one other follow-up here from, I think it was either yesterday or 2 days ago. I talked about the amount of fans of certain sports. The numbers have come out, and Game 7 of the World Series, 25 million viewers. Game 7 of the NBA Finals, only 17 million, which those numbers are crazy. And I don't necessarily think that numbers of viewers equate to how many fans of a sport there really is. I think with those numbers, there are a ton of different factors that would affect the Game 7 numbers. Game 7 of the World Series is on a Saturday, where Game 7 of the NBA Finals is on a Sunday, so that probably has a little bit of effect. But I still think that the NBA overall has maybe more collectors just in general, and I think actually this was one point that someone brought up. It's maybe not necessarily collectors, it's people who are into sports cards, and I use collectors as just maybe like a term that's talking about someone who collects cards or buys cards. And maybe it's more of the money that is popular within the NBA. It's like people want to chase whatever the next player is, or they want to make the next flip. And with baseball, there's much more of a history within baseball cards than there is within basketball cards. I think we're going to get to a point where it's going to be very similar. Like, I think that vintage basketball actually doesn't get as much credit as maybe it deserves, honestly, in the basketball market in general, where vintage baseball, that's like, if you are a baseball collector, that's sort of where you're at. You're in vintage, you're looking at vintage. That's like one of the big markets that a lot of people like there. So that was, just a little bit of a follow up that I wanted to talk about because I saw the numbers and I thought it was crazy that baseball had 25 million versus the NBA only having 17 million viewers in both of their respected game sevens. That's all we've got for the show today. Make sure you leave a comment. Let us know what you thought about today's topics. Also, come back here to the Sports Card Nonsense YouTube channel every day for more daily nonsense. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.